We're off.
Okay, welcome students to the second installment of the Effective Communication webinar series. This is the part 2 or the last part of your resource support series. So we're going to be doing this is the second one. There's 2 versions for your resources or your learning activities. Today's session, we're going to be taking you through the last 3 learning activities, which is powerful presentations, teams, and communication, and the very last learning activity, outcome-focused meetings. If you missed the first one, have a look at the video, which you can actually see on your screen there. That'll actually take you through the first 2 learning activities. So by the end of this session, this is the resource, effective communication resource part 2. By the end of this session, you'll have all of the information that you need to successfully answer the questions found in your learning activities, powerful presentations, team and communications, outcome-focused meetings. Also, just a public service announcement for effective communication students and Diploma of Business students in general. Next Monday, we would normally be running this webinar or this time slot. For this particular subject, it's actually been allocated and changed to the following Wednesday. And the reason for that, there is actually a public holiday in Victoria next Monday, so I shall not be around and available to run this session. We'll be scheduling that for Wednesday instead. Keep an eye out for the schedule notices for upcoming webinars, but this is the very last one for your resources, and midweek next week we'll be actually taking you through the assessment tasks that will be required or found in this unit as well. So by the end of next week you'll have all of the information that you need to go ahead and complete this subject in conjunction obviously with the learning materials and supplementary materials as well. Alyssa?
Yes, absolutely. But unfortunately for those of us that live in New South Wales, we don't have a public holiday next Monday. So just another pro for Victoria then, I guess, Adam.
It's true. It's nice that we've got this Victoria-New South Wales thing in nice and early in the session today. You guys will have your Labour Day. I believe that you guys have a Labour Day in October or August, October, something like that. Can you confirm that?
Yeah, I think it's October actually. I think off the top of my head, I think we do get that October, but then you guys get Melbourne Cup.
We do. We have a horse race in November. That's very well observed. Yes.
Oh, the ongoing battle of who is supreme.
It is. It is. We haven't worked that out yet. Maybe we'll let our students decide on that one by the end of the course. But let's just jump into it. We've got 3 different groupings of questions to take you guys through today. Nothing overly difficult. So if you're in the live feed, that's fantastic. If you're watching it back on replay, that's absolutely fantastic too. Feel free to skip through to the bits that you need if you're watching it on a replayed version. So let's just take you through the first set of questions, which is powerful presentations.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now maybe just while we're loading that up, I guess a couple of things. Last week we took you through effective communication, which was the first set of questions in preparing for effective meetings. So we talked about, a few different things, different communication tools, how to build levels of trust, talking about communication, like 2-way communication, for example, and building rapport, barriers to communication. We talked about having an open door policy. We also talked about just preparation for a meeting. So why prepare for a meeting, things that you can do to prepare. This sort of follows on from that really nicely. So if you've already answered those first couple, you'll find that this one definitely just flows on beautifully from where we left off last week.
Yep, absolutely. So hopefully you can all see my screen where we've got that very, very first question for effective communication, which basically, and I'll start it off with, is when leading a meeting, why is it important to analyse the audience? Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important to say, we're talking about it in the case of meetings because effective communication, we have branded and we've named the subject effective communication. It actually relates to the managed meetings unit of competency. So we talk about, we use the word meeting when we're talking about, but really for the purpose of this particular question, when leading a meeting, so when presenting something, so if you're running a presentation, don't think about that as anything different to, I guess, when you're sort of chairing or leading a meeting, for example, because we're effectively asking the same sorts of things. So from Alyssa from our perspective, and we're quite sort of used to doing training and training groups face to face, running presentations and running training sessions with groups. So I guess all of those sorts of contexts and scenarios do apply to this situation as well. So I guess the question here is when leading a meeting or when running a presentation, a training, whatever it might be, why is it important to analyse the audience? The question really is, why is it important to analyse and know who your participants are and know who your audience is?
Absolutely.
So as a trainer, Lisa, did you want, why, I guess, what for you, what's the importance in knowing who's in the audience?
Well, I think that it's important to know who your audience is so that you can actually construct your meeting or perhaps even your presentation methods to suit their needs. I think, if you're leading a meeting, you're trying to communicate a series of messages. So it's really important that you understand who your audience is and you correctly cater for what they need. So if it is, say, for example, you might be in a meeting with a series of CEOs. So obviously their requirements might be very different. So you might have to cater the language, maybe perhaps have some kind of analytical information in there or some reporting mechanisms as well, because that is what they need to hear. As opposed to perhaps a very informal based team meeting or training session where you've got people that perhaps need a little bit, something a little bit different. They might be kinesthetic type of learners, so you might have to incorporate some different training methods into there. So I always think that it's really important to know your audience so you can cater your presentation methods to that particular audience just to ensure that you meet the objectives there.
Spot on. I would agree 100% with what you say because I've had sort of similar experience in face-to-face presentations and leading a group. We talked last week actually, Lisa, about the word empathy and understand when you're communicating with somebody, the stronger you're able to empathise with them. So the greater your understanding of them is, then the far stronger your communication with that person becomes. So if I really understand you and really, really, truly completely understand where you're coming from, when you explain something to me, I'm able to completely get the full scope of what you're trying to say and what you're trying to communicate with me. And I guess there's a similarity in that, in knowing your audience, being able to empathise and understand them, you're able to provide them what it is that they need. So if you're, in the case of running a meeting, it's not always about what they need per se, but if you're wanting to communicate cleanly to somebody else, understanding that person is incredibly important. We also talk about, I guess, style and structure. So we talk about things like group dynamics and what happens when you get certain individuals in a group together and things like that. It's also important to know your audience as well, just to sort of identify those that you may need to sort of, keep under wraps, as it were, or those that are likely to sort of speak up or speak out. And have some techniques and some things ready for those particular people. Trainers, we know this scenario better than most. When you have a student that's wanting to answer every one of your questions, wants to be involved in everything, you sometimes worry that others may be missing out on that experience, or not everybody is as confident to jump in and start answering questions and being engaged and things like that. So this is probably leading on a little bit more to the next question.
Yeah.
So I might sort of say what I was about to say there for that next question. But really, I guess we talked last week about preparing and knowing what the purpose of the meeting is. This is the same sorts of thing. If you're not sure what the purpose of the meeting is, then it's not going to be very efficient at all. You're going to be wasting people's time. And it's also important to know who's in the audience. You talked about background, you talked about language, but even in terms of, I guess, levels of authority in the business or positions or context of their role, you need to know who is in the audience, because there might be some things that you can and can't say.
Yeah.
And you might have various different stakeholders, people from different businesses, people from different business units that shouldn't be sharing certain bits of information or may not be. So, or for the same matter, you might be bringing people in from other departments that may not know the conversations that your department have had. And when you're discussing certain things, you may need to give a bit of a background of the discussion just for the benefit of everybody else in the room. So knowing exactly who's coming will give you a bit of a heads up in terms of preparation and give you a hand of as far as what you need to organise and prepare for that meeting or presentation.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So I did sort of talk on a little bit longer. What I was sort of getting at there was a little bit more relating to this question. So question 2 talks about describe some of the steps you might take when you're presenting information to a group,
Yep.
and what strategies might you do to keep them engaged.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I guess the example that I was talking about was the over-engagement. Have you got a few ideas on this one, Alyssa?
Oh, look, I think it's a nice follow-on question from that very first one, that very first question. So I think it's really, really important, and I think when you are leading a meeting or delivering a small training session, that you really do keep people engaged. And quite often, you know, we talk about the word, you know, facilitate or chair meetings or facilitate training. So I guess for me personally, some of the steps that I take when presenting information is I make sure that I've got a variety of different methods. So I might use, you know, a visual method. I might use a verbal method. I try and keep information in the presentation that is relevant, up to date, and current. I like to use a lot of different types of media, you know, and a lot of different types of methods to make sure that people are engaged.
Yep.
I also enjoy kind of allowing people to take the opportunity to talk a lot and kind of, I guess, facilitate those ideas sometimes, because rather than just dictate information to people or just kind of, you know, just kind of keep talking, it's nice to encourage other people to share information, because I think that keeps people engaged. But also just using a different type or a series of different types of media within your presentation as well also keeps it engaging. Big fan of TED. Big fan of TED Talk sometimes when I am training, because I think that's a really nice, relevant, current, up-to-date strategy to use. So, I mean, personally, that's some of the steps that I take to make sure people are engaged. I quite like, you know, team-based activities sometimes, you know, just kind of getting people up and about and getting them moving also kind of keeps people physically engaged, I think. But, yeah, look, that's some of the strategies that I would use.
Sure.
Yeah.
Look, for this, I mean, and I'm 100% with you, and there's lots of little techniques that you can do. I mean, actually using somebody's name is one of the most powerful ways to bring them in. Let's talk about the cocktail party effect, where you could be standing in a cocktail, you're at a cocktail party, you're in a room, and on the other side of the room you hear your name spoken amongst the roar of the crowd, as it were, of the room. You can hear your name spoken across the room, and that's called the cocktail party effect. What I'm suggesting by that is that we are incredibly and strongly connected to our name. We've got a ridiculously large physiological response to our name since being children, being a baby. If you use somebody's name, it's a very, very strong way to get their attention and to try and engage them. So that's something. Let's just try and answer this question from the point of view of you've got a business meeting. It's not an opportunity that we can put TED Talks on and use different visuals and ball games and get people up on their feet. We have got to talk about, you know, maybe some sort of policy or procedural change. It's a 20-minute meeting at work. It's us giving information. Last week we talked about some of the different types of meetings. Let's just do it from the point of view that we have to give information. So it's very hard to engage, because the purpose or the point of the meeting is for us to talk to them.
Yep.
Yeah, so what can we do? What things, this is sort of where I would like this, I mean, look, if the students can throw things in that we talked about, that's great, because it means that they're a bit creative and they're thinking outside the square. But really, what I'd like the students to think about here is, what can they do, what things can they think about and do really in preparation to delivering some sort of meeting, when you know, okay, maybe it's 20 minutes, maybe it's an information providing meeting. There's not a whole lot of opportunities to otherwise engage.
Sure.
Yeah. So, have you got any thoughts?
Yeah, like I guess in that type of situation, I guess you know, we could consider the fact that, you know, I think adults sometimes lose engagement quite quickly. So maybe we really focus on making sure we deliver the message quite simply and within a certain amount of time.
Yeah.
and also make the information, the way we deliver it, relevant to the people or the audience that are in there. And hopefully, using those three strategies, we might be able to keep them engaged for a short period of time, just not, I guess, stretching it out a lot, if that makes sense.
So, I mean, look, following on from last week, we talked about preparation. This is the same sort of thing. For me, it's about really knowing, the previous question asked about audience, so knowing your audience, knowing your point, knowing what you're going to be saying, and sticking really strongly to that time frame, because, you know, if people are feeling like they're getting behind in their work, they're going to start thinking about the work that's building up. You want to keep things running to schedule as much as possible, otherwise you may very well lose people very, very quickly.
That's right.
But your ideas, though, earlier about different visual aids and things like that, all those sorts of things are really clever. Anything you can do. But for me, when you're giving a presentation, and those that are new to it, I guess they're going to be a little bit focused inside, you know, about themselves. They're looking at their notes, they're checking their stance, they're clearing their throat, they're sort of trying to just get themselves together, as it were. What happens, I guess, when you focus too much on yourself is that you forget about what's happening outside. I guess a good way and a strategy to keep those engaged is really to focus your energy on your audience. Keep your mind and your focus really on your audience, and you'll know just by, you know, focusing with them and being with them as much as you can when they're engaged and when they're not engaged. And generally, if you are giving your attention to other people, they notice it, and they'll give their attention back to you. So if somebody is giving their whole heart attention to you, it's very difficult actually to look away from somebody who's really focused on you.
Yeah.
Likewise, if somebody's looking around the room and looking at their feed and reading off their notes, it's very, very hard to keep that, for an audience member that is, it's very hard to keep focused on them because their focus is everywhere. So it's really difficult. So that's definitely a good technique while you're presenting, just to really, you know, push all of your energy out and focus on others.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do definitely like that idea. I think, yeah, relying on that connection with the audience and really connecting to the audience itself through your body language is also a really good way to engage people, which I think really then can lead us on nicely to that third question there.
Cool.
Yeah, and I think, you know, that's a really good example that you gave, you know, like eye contact and kind of drawing them in. I think that's a really nice way to show that, you know, you're focused on the audience and it's about them. So I think, yeah, as you mentioned, that's a really nice start to that third question there, which...
So obviously eye contact, so we're on question 3 now, give a couple of examples of positive body language and why it's an important part of communicating effectively. So we just wanted to give us 2 examples and then give us an explanation of why it's important. So, you know, the obvious one here is eye contact. Let's be honest, I don't mind, put it in there. I mean, it is the one, it's really the most important one. If your eyes are everywhere, it's very, very hard to expect that your audience are going to be focused on you if you can't offer the same. But what we want you to do is tell us why you think that eye contact is such an important part of communication and communicating effectively and keeping people engaged. Yeah, so what are some other examples of good body language? I mean, looking is, the eye contact is the obvious one, but what are some other ones there?
Oh, look, I think if you're standing when you're presenting as well, that your body language is very relaxed and open and not protective of information, not closed. So, like, even just of hands as well, hand gestures, you know, can kind of re-emphasize some of the points that you are making. I think, you know, making sure your positioning of your body. So if you are presenting in terms of a meeting and maybe you might have a visual aid, just making sure you don't turn your back on the audience as well. I think
that's bad.
Yeah, it is very hard. And I guess if you get your body on an angle, you can do it, but you've just got to be quite conscious of that too. So they're like, I mean, that's probably got more to do with actually body positioning and just being quite open with your arms and just not, I guess, folding your arms or crossing your arms or, you know, kind of so you're not allowing the flow of information.
Yeah, I think those crossed arms, it's really something. I mean, the next time any of you guys are listening into this, the next time you notice somebody that's communicating with you that has their arms crossed, just think about how it feels for that moment and just think about what they're saying and whether you feel that they're hiding something or not really being open about something, or feeling quite often when you do the crossed arms thing, it's quite a defensive sort of stance and body mechanism, and the language that comes off it is very defensive as well. So just have a look at that. That's a really good point that you've mentioned there.
Yeah.
I started a job many years ago. We had an induction program, and on day one, everybody comes in, and this is really common in business and induction programs. Everybody has a little name tag, and everybody puts their name tag on the desk, and you come in, and you've got a little spot to sit down at, and induction programs are often really well worked out. There's a bit of socialising going on at the start, and it's a really nice, gentle way to start in a new business.
Yep.
So the gentleman that was running the induction program, I remember very clearly, he sat behind his desk. He remained seated with a computer and a desk in between us and him, and introduced the first 15 to 20 minutes talking about the business and welcome to the business and the new company, and we're all here and all. He did that full presentation from behind his desk, sitting down, and it really put me off. I remember it. I mean, it was. I just felt like we were. It just made me feel that us as new members of the business were maybe not good enough for him to even stand up and welcome us, or we were a bother, or it was just annoying for him to even be there. It was just very hard to explain what it felt like, but it just didn't feel that great. And
that's
I
what
later discovered he was
Yeah, and that's what having a desk. It's interesting, like the body level. So he's putting himself down, sitting down. So he's seated on the same level as you, but there is that like the lack of wanting to communicate, or the lack of flow is blocked by the desk and the computer. Yeah, it is a very interesting way to present something, especially if you've got new people in the organisation and you really want to get them on board, and you really want to get them engaged. It's probably doing the opposite. Yeah, wow.
I remember just feeling really bothered by it, Alyssa. I just wasn't comfortable with it. So, the body. I mean, just have a look at yourself in the mirror and just do different things with your body and work out what they, have a think about what it means. Moving your hands, opening your hands up, the way that you position your legs and you stand up, and if you think about yourself in this open stance, an open stance is far more welcoming than a closed stance where you have your legs crossed, your arms crossed, your body is really taut. The more relaxed and open you are, the more likely others are going to be comfortable in your space as well. So I'll let the guys get a bit creative with this one. We've sort of given them a couple ideas. Use those ideas. Just give us an explanation as to why you feel it's important. Feel free to use sort of your own words in this. We're really happy for you to use your own sort of thinking thought process for this one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I agree. It can be based on experience as well. Like you might have experienced a specific thing that, or a specific type of body language that you found in somebody else that was that really kind of made you feel a little bit unsettled, like you had mentioned before, Adam. So yeah, I'm happy for a very personal approach to that too, which will be interesting to see what people's responses are.
Cool. Let's move on. Question 4 states, when leading meetings, it is important that they are time efficient. So describe 2 strategies that you'll use to make sure this happens consistently in your organisation. Let's get through this question really quick, because I feel we really covered this stuff last week.
Yes, we did, yes. Yeah, no, absolutely.
In terms of preparing. So
Yeah. All right. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like I would, for something like this, when leading a meeting, it is important that they are time efficient. So one important way that I would use to make sure that it happens consistently and there is the correct time allocated, I make sure there are things like an agenda to ensure that people know exactly what they need, what will be talked about, and the time frames in which they would talk about them. So that's one way that I would make sure that we manage that time effectively.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
So preparation is key. Have an agenda. Be organised.
Yeah.
I would say let participants know well in advance of the meeting.
Yeah. Also,
don't be late like crazy. It's obvious, but be early. Be early and be prepared so that you're half an hour early, 15 minutes early, whatever you need to do to be fully and utterly prepared to deliver from the minute it starts, then do it. You can even, depending on the formality of the meeting, you might even elect to have somebody to manage the time for you and have a look and just give you a bit of a heads up when you're passing a certain time.
Yeah, no, all of those strategies would definitely work. The better off, the better prepared you are, like Adam had said, the easier it's going to be to be able to make sure those meetings run on time. All right, let's have a look.
And remind your participants as well. Everybody's busy, so send a little reminder message out to your participants before they're required to be there too. Last question of this set.
Absolutely. All right, what is the impact of failing to inform the participants of the meeting in plenty of time, which is obviously what you touched on basically just back then. Give an example of when you have been a participant and this has happened to you. Oh.
Okay, so just preempting the student's question here, this hasn't happened to me, what can I say? Look, if it hasn't happened to you, just put your mind in that place of what it would be like if you were in that particular situation. So if somebody failed to inform you of somewhere where you should have been, and then you missed that meeting, what would happen? Or just give an example holistically of how it feels and what might potentially happen if you miss a meeting, for example.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Oh,
the obvious ones are the obvious ones. We sort of talked about it, so I think we'll let the students kind of figure this one out. There's nothing too tricky about this one.
Sounds good. All right, just give me 2 seconds. I'm just going to organise.
Yeah, let's roll on to the next. Yep.
Yep, great. Just give me 2 seconds. Does anybody, I guess, while we're just loading this up, I'm just wondering if there's any questions that anybody might have with regards to anything in that particular section. Just pop it in the chat box and Adam and I would be happy to answer them. Okay. All right. Yay. I think those questions are actually quite good. They're quite like, you know, they flow nicely. So I think they're quite easy to understand and they're quite easy to what we need from them. So I'm just getting on to question 1. Yay.
I think you're on the wrong one there. Oh, there we go.
Oh, yep. Back to question 1. Yep.
Good. Got the right one.
Right. Okay, shall we have a look at this very first question, Adam? I believe this could be a favourite of yours.
Yeah. Well, I think I'll try and answer this as best as I can.
Yeah, of course.
And feel free to jump in as well.
Yeah, no, definitely. I'll read the question out if you like. Yeah. In your own words, describe the 3 different communication styles within a team. So passive, aggressive, and constructive. And describe how each style might impact performance. Oh, okay.
Okay, that's really interesting. So really for answering this question, what we want you to do is just put the separate subheadings, passive, aggressive, and constructive. If the guys want to use the word assertive instead of the word constructive, I'm absolutely fine because it's of the same field, and I'm going to just talk about it a little bit. But I guess to answer this question, you know, just put each of those words as a subheading, and then you can answer the question. So describe how each might impact on performance. When we say impact, you could talk about some of the positives and negatives that are effectively found in each of those styles, and I'm pretty happy with that. Alyssa, you too?
Yeah, no, absolutely, definitely.
Cool. So when we talk about communication styles, what we're actually wanting you just to focus on here is what we call this sort of passive-aggressive continuum. And I'm going to actually substitute the word constructive, which is fine, it's a good word, constructive, with the word assertive, because the actual behaviour that we're trying to elicit here is that of assertion. So instead of using the word constructive, we're going to use the word assertive or assertion, and really it's just one way of looking at people's communication styles and then understanding how they're sort of communicating, and then, you know, trying to adapt and work with that. Also being aware of those different styles and seeing what some of the pros and cons of each of those styles are. So when we say the word continuum, we're talking really about like this big, large, say like a large piece of string, for example. On one side of the string, we've got passive, also known as submissive sort of behavior. And on the far other end of the string that we're holding, we've got aggressive. Now directly in the middle, so what we find right in dead set in the middle is what we call constructive, or assertive behaviour. So I guess I'll talk about that first one. I've got some notes here, so I'm going to do a bit of reading. So I haven't actually prepared. I've just got a whole bunch of notes, and I'm just going to start reading. My notes, if anybody's interested, it's actually taken from a book called People Skills by Robert Bolton. So this book, People Skills, actually breaks down a couple of key things, a couple of key areas like listening, reflective listening, assertion, understanding the ability to be assertive, and managing conflict. So it's a fantastic read for those that want to just generally enhance their own understanding and skill in communication. But and this sort of flows on from listening. So if you're a very, very good listener, then you're ready to sort of to work on you know, assertive sort of behaviour, if you like. But look, for the purpose of this, the content actually describes it. So for the students, you guys are going to go and have a look at the materials, and you'll be able to answer the question from the learning materials. But just to sort of, as a discussion while we're having a chat, I guess the assertive person utilises methods of communicating which enable them to maintain self-respect, pursue happiness and the satisfaction of their needs, and defend the rights of their personal space. This is the key, without abusing or dominating other people. And that's, I guess, why it fits nicely and squarely in the middle. So true assertiveness is a way of being in the world which confirms one's own individual worth and dignity while simultaneously confirming and maintaining the worth of others. So it's a really interesting way to sort of explain it. Aggression, we know what aggression is. It just makes sense to us when we see it, when we feel it, we hear it. It's not always easy to see passive or sort of submissive sort of behaviours. Now, submissive behaviours, I guess it's people who typically behave submissively, or we're talking about passively in this situation, but I'm going to substitute the word with submissive.
Yep.
So people who typically behave submissively demonstrate a lack of respect for their own needs and rights. And they do this in many ways. So many submissive people do not express their honest feelings, needs, values, or concerns. They actually allow others to violate their space. They allow others to deny them rights and ignore their needs. And these people rarely state their desires when in many instances that's all it would take to have them met. So we're talking about, I guess, yeah, look, people who behave in submissive ways often accumulate enormous amounts of, so passive people, very, very passive or submissive people, they often accumulate a lot of anger that can actually eventually spill out into like a Mount Vesuvius response. What happens is after, you know, the straw that breaks the camel's back, all of a sudden this, just out of nowhere, they just erupt like a volcanic eruption, and a lava of aggression just comes out. And following that outburst, they usually feel quite guilty and return very quickly to their sort of submissive behaviour. On the other side of the spectrum, we've got aggressive people or aggressive behaviours. Now, an aggressive person really is one that expresses their feelings, their needs, but they do so at the expense of others. So this is really where it differentiates between being constructive, communicating constructively, or being assertive, is that an aggressive person, they seem to carry a chip on their shoulder. They may speak loudly, they may be rude, they're abusive, they're sarcastic, they'll berate people, they might berate a waitress for poor service, or they'll dominate subordinates and insist on having the final word in some sort of topic or whatever it might be. Now, the funny thing is aggressive behaviour often pays off. Okay, I'm getting a really bad feedback loop here, Elizabeth. Are you getting that too?
No, I can hear you. I'm just, I'm just,
The funny thing is with aggressive behaviour is it often pays off. Aggressive people are far more likely to secure the materials that they need, the objects that they need. They tend to be able to protect themselves, their own space very, very easily and very, very well. And they retain a lot of control over their own life. So it's a really interesting thing. However, there are consequences of aggressive behaviour, which ironically including things like increased fear. Some people behave aggressively not because they're strong, but because they feel weak. And, aggressive people often feel, large pangs of anxiety and guilt as well because of the way that they're communicating with others too. So it has its it has its negatives, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they get, the materials and the things they need, they tend to make enemies because of their aggressive behaviour, and that's, it can breed paranoia. Another negative consequence is, it creates its own opposition just by nature. So it effectively starts to foster its own destruction in itself. And it's a difficult thing. So this is really what we're talking about. You sort of see the two ends of the spectrum, if you like, and how incredibly opposite they are.
Yeah, definitely. And when I guess when you're in a meeting process and when you're communicating with a lot of different people, these are going to be styles of people and styles of audience members and participants that you will come into contact with. So I guess identifying first and foremost and understanding a little bit about the styles of each of those three that you've just discussed really will help you manage them in a meeting environment, because they will pop up and they will kind of be dominant, or they might be quite submissive, or they might be quite assertive. So it can be very challenging trying to deal with all three types in a presentation, during a presentation, or in a meeting. So it is very interesting to kind of look at those perspectives. Just a quick question off the offside. Do you think that, when we talk about those different communication styles, do you think that they evolve in people, or they develop, or they're caused by trauma, or what? I mean, is it an environmental type of thing, do you think?
Well, to be honest with you, my gut feeling is, and it's not something that's discussed in the book at all, but my gut feeling is it's partially environmental.
Yeah.
So, and that's group dynamics in itself, So in different situations, we're going to act slightly differently, in different environments will bring out different parts of our personality, all of those things.
Yeah.
But I do feel that typically we have a natural state, maybe when we're with our partner at home, we kind of just fall into our natural state, as it were. So, the irony is that quite often submissive people or passive people look for more aggressive people in a relationship, and vice versa. And vice versa. So really, I guess what we're trying to get you guys to sort of consider is that speaking out and trying to get what you want and need is a really important thing in life. Super important. But doing so not at the expense of other people. Now that's really where the right balance is in general. So look, assertive people generally, the funny thing about assertive people is that they generally like themselves a lot. They've got a lot of self-worth. They're comfortable, putting themselves out there. Because the thing is, it's actually risky to be assertive. Why is it risky to be assertive? Well, to truly be yourself is kind of risky, because you're actually putting your true self out there for others to judge and see. So
definitely.
It's not easy, but
it is definitely very much exposing who you are and being proud of that element of yourself as well. So that can be, quite challenging for a lot of people. So,
but there's so much research out there that suggests that this is really where to get that, inner peace, as it were.
Yeah.
To reduce anxiety, to do all those sorts of things. It's important that you understand yourself and that you're willing to ask for some things. Ask the world for what it is that you need, but do so not at the expense of other people and not stepping on other people, because there's, as we've discovered, there's lots of feelings of guilt, surrounding when you're too far the other way, when you're aggressive. When you're controlling other people, it actually limits your own freedom. It takes energy to supervise somebody else, and look, you start feeling guilty about the fact that you've abused somebody else's space. After a while, it actually can undermine a healthy relationship between two people or within an organisation as well. So
yeah.
I think we should probably move on just to time. But have a look at the material guide.
Yeah. I guess, that was a very interesting conversation, and it's good to kind of explore those types of ideas, I think, sometimes. But I guess if we look at question 2, what is your most natural or authentic communication style, and how do you adapt your style at times to suit the style to suit the style of others that you need to communicate with. So I guess what it's doing is it's really asking you to think about those 3 styles that were presented in question 1, and perhaps kind of, I guess, analysing or asking yourself which is your most natural or authentic communication style. So which one do you connect with? Which one do you think embodies who you are? And, you know, this would be another little bit of professional development for yourself or personal development for yourself to really think about, you know, where you fit in terms of those 3 different communication styles.
So, for example, if you identify yourself with one of those 3, give us some options on how you might communicate with the other 2.
Yeah.
Or just pick 2 of those 3 styles that we've had before. So I really can't speak here. I'm getting a really, really bad slap back in my voice. Are you not hearing that?
No, I'm not, but do you want me to try? I might just try and mute you for a second, then just see what happens.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, hold on a tick. Oh, I'm going all crazy here.
Sorry, that's all.
No, you're doing it all good. How is that now, Adam?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Alrighty. Yes, that's better. That's good.
Oh, jolly good.
I can.
Sometimes.
Oh, that's better. Okay.
Yeah,
turn
no.
it on and voila. Okay.
Yeah, and absolutely. As
So just identify 2 styles there, guys. Any 2. Feel free to pick 2 or pick 3. I mean, you can just do it. You don't really even have to. We do want you to just identify some authentic communication style, but just pick a couple of the ones that were listed before and just talk about how you can, you know, work with that sort of a style. So
yeah. Well, that sounds good to me. I think I'll just pop on to question number 3 and 4, so we'll wrap this section up. Just give me 2 seconds while we load it up. It's all very interesting, like, you know, when we talk about communication and all those types of things, it's all very unique and it's all very behavioural based. So it's very interesting to work about, to work through some people, things about people and understanding how they communicate. It's quite interesting.
Absolutely.
All right, let's have another quick look at question 3. So it says, describe 2 effective strategies for controlling a meeting and how do you encourage healthy participation and discussion? Ooh, so 2 effective strategies for controlling a meeting. Are we talking about just controlling the topic or just controlling the content or the direction of the meeting? Is that what we're looking for? Because I would be looking for something along those lines.
Just the direction. So how do you make sure that you're able to keep everything on par and on track, and how do you make sure that others don't, derail the conversation, as it were, but how do you also encourage healthy participation and discussion whilst not derailing it? That's sort of the balance, really.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think personally, again, having that preparation involved, so having something like an agenda set out with strict time constraints and perhaps even allocating specific parts of the meeting to specific people. And I think, in your role, if you are driving the meeting and you are the chairperson as well, I think it's a responsibility to make sure you embody the role of the chairperson and you really kind of try and you probably have heard the term, you car park it. If there is an idea that kind of comes up during a meeting that is not relevant, you kind of make sure you address that it's not relevant, but it is something that could be addressed if we have time or addressed in another meeting.
Okay, I just want to jump on from where you just left off there, because what you said was so beautiful. Because what we were just talking about before, I'm sorry, I'm getting this feedback again. It's just really nasty.
Oh. Do you want me to try and mute you again, or are you okay?
Look, don't worry about it. We'll just push on. Well, we were talking about before with passive, assertive, and aggressive. So this is. So I just got a bit confused there for a second. This is actually what you were kind of talking about there, and it does relate as well for what you were talking about. Sorry, I'm struggling to speak without hearing myself in both my ears.
Let me
just continue for a second.
Let me just mute. Yeah, let me just mute you, and what I'll do is I'll unmute you. Okay. Yep. So how's that sound, Adam? Are you okay with that?
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, that's. about the same. Okay, that's all right.
We're having Monday day today. Look, as mentioned before, I mean, I guess making sure that you know, people know exactly what the relevance of the meeting is. I think being a strong chairperson and really driving and focusing and making sure you stay in line with the agenda will really help you in terms of controlling a meeting. I've been involved in meetings where sometimes it is a bit of a free-for-all and the chairperson hasn't actually controlled the meeting. So a meeting that's supposed to be an hour might go for 3 hours and it becomes very ineffective. So I think it's all about preparation. It's all about people knowing what the agenda is looking at. I think it's all about making sure that people know time constraints as well. I think those are some good, strong methods for being able to control a meeting. And anything that's not relevant, making sure that you identify it as being not relevant. Because as soon as you engage in conversation, then you're really opening up the floor and opening up the meeting to discuss things that perhaps might not be relevant. So you've got to make sure you kind of, you know, you car park those as soon as you can.
So just to finish off what I was going to say before, I apologise, guys, for those that are listening in. We're just talking about, I guess, passive and aggressive behaviour, and this is sort of what you're talking about there. What you just demonstrated there when you said, you know, let's car park that idea. Let's just really love what you're talking about there. Let's just car park it for the moment, and we'll definitely come back to that. That is perfect demonstration of assertive behaviour. So a chairperson that's assertive because they know what they need to be achieving, the timelines and what they need to be talking about, and they realise that that conversation, whilst it may be important, is not relevant right now. We need to car park it. If I was aggressive, I would say, listen, John, what you're talking about is rubbish, it's irrelevant, shut it up.
Yeah, I can't believe you brought that up. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so what we actually just talked about before with the communication styles and the balance, that's really how to actually effectively do it. So don't be too aggressive with your approach as chair. Don't be too laid back either.
Yeah.
Find the happy medium. Know how to ask for what you want, but respect those that are involved in the process as well. And I think that's really about sort of doing it. The second part of the question, how do you encourage healthy participation and discussion? There are many ways to do that. You can ask leading questions of people. You can ask specific opinions of others. You can, you know, just generally put questions out to the group and see who has any questions. But also use your body language as well. The more engaged you are with those, the more likely you are to encourage discussion. Other ideas for that second part of the time?
Yeah, no, I think asking questions, I think even just allocating like a general forum at the end of a meeting as well could also be encouraging participation and discussion too. You know, just having that as a small section on the agenda. But yeah, definitely like asking leading questions, you know, use of the body language, you know, ensuring that the floor is open to all people. So just bordering on what you said, yeah, definitely. And just having that little section in an agenda if you can.
I like it.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at the last question here.
Absolutely. Give an example of a time when you have led a meeting with a disruptive participant. What behaviours did they display and how did you handle the situation? Okay. Now, I've never had a disruptive participant. I remember, it's probably not so much a meeting, but I think I've only ever in my life thrown one person out of a meeting. I remember I had a gentleman in one of my meetings and he was being really disruptive. He was very negative during the meeting. He really was, I think, what I would probably border on being quite aggressive. He was making references and inappropriate remarks to other people during the meeting. And literally,
I was at that meeting.
We've all been at that meeting, and I did.
Sounds familiar.
So I mean, it was probably one of the only times that I really felt my boundaries being pushed, only because I could see other participants and other people that had come to the meeting were very compromised. So I literally asked that person to leave. There was no way that he was being a participant, and the behaviours were absolutely inappropriate. And you've got to get rid of that as soon as you can, because your meeting will never be effective and you'll never reach your objective, and it's not fair.
You're right. Look, there are times where you have disruptive participants that don't realise they're being disruptive. So
Yep.
there are times where people are being just out and out aggressive, and what you've done is the only way to rescue the meeting.
Yep.
In the case where you've got somebody that's being disruptive, and they may or may not be aware that what they're doing is derailing the meeting and that there's a schedule and all of these things. So what can we do, I guess, with that particular situation to you know, make sure that we're back on track again? What can we do?
I would probably drive, or I would hopefully probably use my body language to kind of move the energy from that person. Hopefully I would have done, you know, what that very first activity was, you know, about, like, I would understand my audience a little bit, and I'd probably use information that I had on my other audience members to try and direct, I guess, move away from that particular participant and try and create direction and focus around other participants based on what I knew about them. I think that's something.
That's actually really funny that you say that, because actually one of the techniques for handling it is that you can do both. You can actually do that, or you can likewise give them a task, give them a job specific. You're in the meeting. Okay, John, I'm going to get you to. What I want you to do is compile all of the responses from everybody, and whatever it is, give them a problem to think about for the rest of the day. Whatever it is. Sometimes actually giving them something to do is the way to go.
Yeah, that's a good idea. It's a great idea.
At the very least, when we're communicating, people just want to be understood. That's really the basic premise of communicating. If somebody's speaking out, there's a chance that they just feel like they haven't been understood with something. One of the ways you can deal with that is just to reframe and restate what they've just said, summarise what they've just said, so that they feel that they've been understood. And at that point you might say, look, John, what we're going to do is we've just got to get through this meeting now, but I do want to catch up with you and have a chat about this.
Yep.
So, you know, if you've got some free time after this meeting, let's catch up. Does that sound good? Beautiful. And everyone's happy. Everyone's going to feel like they're understood, that they're getting their voice heard, and you can continue on with the meeting, because there's a lot of other people in the meeting that, you know, that don't want to be disrupted and derailed and so on. So, yeah.
And that's a great idea too. Yeah, definitely giving them something that changes their dynamic, or changes, gives them something to do.
You know, the learning material talks about the bulldog.
Yeah.
So they talk about different types of people you're going to find in a meeting, and one's a bulldog, and they suggest to the bulldog to give him something to chew on.
I love it. You know? I love it.
Throw the dog a bone, give him something to gnaw on, and you know what? Funnily enough, that's quite often the case. So, you know, sometimes as a facilitator, when you know there's one person that's answering every single question, you can say, and we do this all the time when so we can say, John, I know you know the answer, so I'm just going to see if anybody else in the group knows the answer. Now, what that does is it actually gives John this ego boost, like, see, I'm the special. He knows I know the answer. I'm feeling very special, and you know, it'll keep him quiet for a minute. So it works well.
I love it. I love that strategy. I think it's a great little strategy. But it's no, that's good. I like it. I like the
Let's jump on to the last.
Activities.
Sorry, we're taking a while here. And also, I might have to do like a little test with you tomorrow before our next session, because this is just, it's a bit putrid, my feedback that I've got here on my audio.
All right, no worries at all. All right, outcome-focused meetings. I'll just crack that open.
Yep. I think there's only a couple of questions here. We'll just answer them really literally, because they're just pretty straightforward in any case.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I think 2 or 3 questions maximum, but yeah, we'll just rip through them, because to be honest, they are what they are.
Sounds great. All right, I'll just go back to my question 1. Yeah, I think these are about the reviewing of the meeting and reporting on outcomes of meetings, and you know, how you store your minutes and stuff like that. Okay, great. All right, hopefully you can see my screen now.
The question is, why are accurate minutes such an important aspect of any meeting? We know we have to take minutes, but why are accurate minutes? Accurate. Why is it important to get the minutes right?
Yes.
What likely to happen if you get the minutes wrong? Let's answer it from that point of view.
Well, that's exactly right. Like if you've sat through a meeting and I guess what you've taken down or the minutes you've taken down are incorrect, I mean, that could have a considerable impact on the actual success or the actual achieving of the objectives of your meeting. And remember, minutes are disseminated once the meeting has ended, so people rely on that information to be able to therefore action certain tasks. So if the information is inaccurate, that will definitely impact on what actionable items there are associated or attached to that meeting.
Absolutely. You lose synergy in the group because half the group thinks, well, hang on, I thought we talked about that. Well, hang on, I've got this email that says this is what we're doing, or that was what we talked about, or that's what we decided on. So you might have this, you've got a much higher risk of things going wrong because clearly people are pulling in different directions.
Yeah.
And as I said, one of the most important aspects of the minute is the action items. Who's doing what? Now, if those action items are wrong, the wrong person, the wrong action, then forget about it. The whole thing is going to fall over. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And also just to add on to that as well, minutes obviously are, documents that can be used to support and can be used in compliance with legislative requirements as well. So you want to make sure that your minutes are actually accurate, especially if you've got a meeting around work health and safety or a meeting around a new policy or an updated piece of legislation that you're sharing. Again, those minutes need to be accurate to be able to, perhaps assist you if you need it down the track as well, because they are legal documents.
That's a really good point. That's a very, very good point. So yeah,
Lovely.
there can be legal issues associated. Next question is asking how are they distributed and stored. So now we've got our meetings and our minutes, we know that they're accurate. How are we going to distribute those or send them out to those in the organisation, and then once we've done that, how are we going to keep them on file, as it were, or how are we going to keep them stored?
Yeah, absolutely. And there are lots of different ways that you can store minutes, or there are lots of different ways that you can distribute minutes. And think about people that perhaps might not have access to electronic minutes. I mean, where might you post minutes? How might you send minutes? There are a lot of different ways that they can be distributed. And I guess that second part is where would you store minutes if you were, if you were constructing minutes. So distribution and storage of those are the two key areas with regards to that particular question, I think.
Yeah, and look, you have a look in the learning materials for that one. That one's sort of pretty straightforward. That one you can sort of answer off the cuff anyway. We'd more than gladly accept that one, so that's absolutely fine.
All right, I'm just going to move on
to
those last two questions there, Adam. We're just loading up those two.
Yeah, I'll read out question 3.
Beautiful, here it comes, yep.
So question 3 is list 3 things you would ensure that you did when reporting the outcomes of meetings. Now we know one of them because we just talked about one of them. And that's we're going to distribute all of the minutes because we know that's one of the most important things after a meeting. This is all the action items, the agreed items, this is what happened in the meeting. We've got to make sure that we distribute those to the important people. Mm-hmm. So I guess that's the first point.
Yeah.
What other things can guys do?
When I guess, something else just off the top of my head, list 3 things you would ensure you did when reporting the outcomes of a meeting. If there was any associated documents to support the outcomes, any reports, any of that type of thing, I would make sure that they were referenced or that they were attached in the reporting of outcomes maybe. So if we were referring to anything, I would make sure that those reports or those types of attachments were available. That would be something that I would make sure of.
Especially if there's like a background to a discussion, there was a problem that people were discussing, or there's some sort of background relevance to something or other that was involved in that meeting. It's important to have that sort of, but any additional documentation that's relevant for the actual outcome of that meeting, that's good. Yeah, now look, I would also, obviously the meetings do generally include actionable items, but I would absolutely make sure that the list of actions are involved in that reporting process. So probably the main thing, the list of actions that you're going to do following up that meeting. So
Yeah, no,
the
absolutely.
reporting outcomes of meeting. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, go for it.
With maybe even with those actionable items as well, I guess just allocating a date, perhaps might be a date relating to the next meeting in terms of when the expectation is for those items to be actually actioned by even too, just kind of extending on what you just mentioned there, Adam.
Yeah, sounds good. Sounds good. We've got a few good ideas for students there. That's good.
Yeah, definitely. Oh,
The last question is a good one. So how do you hold team members responsible for actionable items discussed in the meeting?
ooh.
That's funny because we just told you in the previous question that maybe a good thing to do is to add all of your actionable items. So one thing to do is to send those actionable items out to all those in the team. It's a good starting point. So you can do that by email or find a way that you can actually distribute that
Yeah.
effectively.
And once you've
What else
also,
can you do though?
yeah, and I guess once you've sent out your minutes as well, your minutes really are reflective of what has been allocated and what has been discussed in the meeting. So there really is no way out. You know, you've been in the meeting. The document, the minutes have verified that you have been there. The minutes also verify that you have accepted this particular item as well. So you are technically responsible or accountable for making sure that those items are actually actioned too. So it is kind of almost like a document that kind of does make you accountable, because in your actionable items, I've always put people that actually are responsible for each item. So if it's myself, then I get tagged as being actioning this item by this particular date. So it's all set in stone and I can't really get out of it.
Look, I think, we talk about communication through this whole subject. I think communication is the key. I mean, if I'm working in the team and I've distributed a list of action items, I'm probably going to go and seek out, where possible, because not in every situation you can do this, where possible I'm going to seek out that person, look for a conversation with them and just ensure that they understand what is required of them as per that action item, because generally speaking people won't take that step to begin something if they don't understand something. So you want to make sure that there's no level of confusion surrounding what needs to be done or if any additional background information is required. Somebody might say, look, you kept saying this word in that meeting and I have no idea what that word means, and it's just confused me to the point where I actually don't know what I'm doing anymore. Just tell me what that word means and I'll be happy. So seeking people out one-on-one is really important. Also what you can do to ensure that people are responsible is set reminders out. So a week before, every week you can send an updated version. What's been completed or what hasn't been completed. Now, if I send those to every member of the team, I'm more likely to do my action items if I know that other members of the team can see that I still have jobs that I haven't completed, because there's that sort of group mentality, or if you like, you want to make sure that you're not letting the team down, as it were.
Yeah.
So that's another way you can do it. Regular follow-ups, regular checks. The more you communicate, the better in these sort of situations, I find.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a really good thing. I mean, just as you said, just having a conversation with people and just verifying that they understood what's required, and sending out those reminders too. I mean, they're all little things that will ensure that team members are accountable. So yeah, just nice little ideas there, just to kind of cement that whole concept of effective communication, which is nice.
Sounds good.
Oh, yes, it does. It does.
I think we've covered those three learning activities today. It would have been really nice to sort of expand on a few of these, so I apologise if we've sort of been really quick.
Yeah.
If you feel that we haven't completely answered one of the questions as well as you would like, just let Alyssa and I know individually. We'll give you a bit of a helping hand. So yeah, we hope that you've enjoyed this webinar session. This is part 2, so that's the remainder of all of the learning activities that you guys need to do for this particular subject, effective communication. Check in next Wednesday, as we'll be taking you through all of the assessment tasks for this particular subject, this unit. Thank you very much for your attendance. Any questions, please just let us know.
Yeah, absolutely, and have a great night, everybody, and thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.